and then we'll get right into it. Father God, we do thank you that we have this time to come together and explore your word and understand it in a full and rich way. And I pray that you would give us wisdom and understanding to open these stories up and realize the things that are very applicable to us today. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I think Daniel chapter 1 is one of those stories that has a lot of application for today. It's one of the things I'm going to be emphasizing when we go through it. Because Daniel chapter 1, first of all, it gives us a historical marker about when Daniel was written. Daniel was written, probably he was alive somewhere between 605 BC to 539 BC, somewhere in that there. And we can get that from the historical records outside of the Bible, but also from the markers that are inside. But one of the big themes, and we talked about this last week, there's a big theme in the book of Daniel that God is in sovereign control over all things. That there's nothing that's outside of his control. Things might seem as if they're chaotic. Things might seem as if there's no rhyme or reason to them, but God is in control over the affairs of mankind. And so even though the people are going to be taken in exile, God is still in control. And that's going to be a big theme here in this first chapter, but there's some other underlying themes that are going to come out as well. We'll start reading here in verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And again, we can look at the historical record. We know that this happened, and we know just about the time that it happened, so it kind of gives us that historical perspective for the book of Daniel. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. I think there's a couple of things, and I'm not pointing them out necessarily in the outline, but a couple of things that are important. It doesn't say all of the vessels of God's house, because there are some things that are missing. We know some of the things that are missing. What's one of the big things that's still missing to this day? The ark. Yeah, the ark is not the ark. We don't know what happened to the ark. The ark is not mentioned, but some of the vessels were taken, and so he did take some of those. So we have the fall of Judah. If you remember, again, we're going to Israel's history. The northern 10 tribes have already been destroyed and wiped out by the Assyrians. So they're gone. They will never be reformed. They don't return. The way that the Assyrians conquered people was much different than the Babylonians, and so we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. But this being the fall of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin being the final two tribes there in the south of Israel. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, conquered Jerusalem. He conquered him. And so we know him from history. He is a historical figure that really did exist. So we know this is not a mythical tale. Nebuchadnezzar also plundered the temple that was in Jerusalem as a symbol of his dominance. One of the things that kings would do is they would take the stuff that belonged to the gods of the conquered peoples. It was a way of showing dominance. My God is bigger than your God kind of thing, and so they would take that. And we see that in other stories in the scriptures where even the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant, they put it in the house of Dagon, and the stories there of what happened there. So he took some of the vessels from the defeated nation, he put them in the temple of his God. But if you notice in the verse it says, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, to Nebuchadnezzar. So right from the outset, we see Nebuchadnezzar, although he's the instrument of God, he is not the one who caused it to happen. It was God who allowed Judah to fall to the Babylonians. And so it's God, not Nebuchadnezzar, who is responsible for the fall of Jerusalem. The Lord gave King Jehoiakim over to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is simply the tool. And that's something that Nebuchadnezzar is going to have to learn in his own life. It's kind of interesting as his life develops that he has to learn that he thinks he's in sovereign control of everything he's doing and everything that he's acting, and he's not. He is a tool that he is using to chastise the people of Judah for their disobedience. And the word for the Lord is the word Adonai. When it says, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Israel, that's the word Adonai. It denotes the control and the ownership of God. So now we have what's going on after the fall. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and the nobility. So that tells us a little about Daniel right there. Daniel wasn't a commoner. Okay, Daniel was from a royal line. He was from a nobility. Youths without blemish. and of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. It's also kind of a brutal thing in history, but most likely the people who would have been taken that were from the royal family and nobility, they would have also been turned into eunuchs. They would have been part, the Bible doesn't necessarily describe that, but that's kind of the assumption, being how that they're going to be in the king's house. If you don't know what a eunuch is, look it up on Google. All right. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years. At the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. And this is important. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. So this is the beginning of the captivity of these young men. Nebuchadnezzar orders Ashpenaz to begin training some of the Israelite young men for service in his administration. Nebuchadnezzar wanted the cream of the crop. He wanted the best. Again, Daniel, these guys, and his 3 companions, if you were, they weren't nobodies, they weren't commoners. They were in the royal family, most likely, nobility of some sort, although it doesn't really describe where they came from in that variety. And you might ask why. Why did Nebuchadnezzar do this? What was the point? Well, to understand Nebuchadnezzar's motivation, you would have to understand that although Judah was defeated, Nebuchadnezzar didn't conquer all of Judah. He conquered the capitals, okay, because the capital was the center of control. But he didn't destroy the way the other civilizations did prior to Babylon. What he did is, instead of taking it over completely, he wanted to put a puppet ruler in. So he put a man by name, if you look in the historical record, he put a man by the name of Zedekiah on the throne of Judah. And he would be his kind of puppet ruler. And here's the thing. We still do this to this day. It's something that we understand. We knock out a leader somewhere and we put in a leader we like. That's kind of how, and that was what they did here. They put in a leader they liked. And so then he said, I'm going to take the best and the brightest of your young people, and I'm going to train them in the ways of Babylon. I'm going to train them in the culture and the language of Babylon. Why? Well, look at it this way. He's essentially making a 5th column. Oh, the Babylonians aren't so bad. They're great people. Look at their culture and their superiority. And these ones that he would bring back basically become propagandists for the administration. And so we kind of understand that as well. They would hopefully fall in love with the Babylonian way of life and be the propagandists for the Babylonian Empire. And then they would be sent back after the 3 years. The idea was if they were properly indoctrinated, that they would send them back to rule in Judah and be vassal states for the Babylonians. So we really see Nebuchadnezzar is kind of a pragmatist. He has a rapidly expanding empire. He needed people who would support the Babylonian government and the Babylonian administration, and so he couldn't do that by staffing it through all of his people, so he had to enlist the native population that he conquered. And so the captured Israelites would receive the best Babylon had to offer. And again, some of you probably are maybe a little bit too old for this, but did anybody here play the game Civilization or anything like that? All right. Okay, a couple of you, Civilization. There's a video game called Civilization, and you're basically trying to establish your civilization, and there's different ways to win the game. One of the ways that you can win is by military. You can take over the entire world, and that's kind of fun. But another way that you can do it is through cultural victories. And so that's the way America, we've done this in our quote-unquote expansionists. We export our culture. And we say this is the American ways, this is the American ideals, and so we expand that way. That's what Babylon was doing too. They were expanding militarily, but they also wanted to expand culturally. And I think I said this last week, but I don't remember if I did. But the Greeks would learn from the Babylonians about how to do this and how to achieve cultural victories. And so they wanted the young men to experience the best of Babylon. So think about this. If we were to do this today, we'd bring them over to New York, right? Washington, D.C., something like that. And we would give them the best that America has to offer. And then we'd send them back and we'd say, America's not so bad. Look at how great they are. Look at how they treated us. And that's what they're doing here. They're given new names to symbolize their new allegiance. New names to symbolize their new allegiance. So again, this is a complete retooling of their entire persona. Daniel meant God is my judge. That's what his name used to mean. But it becomes Belteshazzar. May a God protect the king. And it's a generic god, one of the pantheon there that the Babylonians would have worshipped. El, you see the word El at the end of Daniel. El, that's the word for God. God is my judge. Becomes Belteshazzar. May God protect the king. Hananiah, Yahweh has been gracious. It's even more specific than Daniel's name. Yahweh has been gracious. And it becomes Shadrach, which is a reference to the god, the false god Marduk, who was part of the Babylonian worship. And what's interesting, jumping ahead a little bit, when you get to the purging by fire, that was part of the way Marduk was worshipped, was through human sacrifice. Mishael, who is what God is. That's what, God is superior. Who is what God is? Becomes Meshach, which is also a reference to the god Marduk. And you can see in Meshach, you have Shadrach, that rack idea. That's that reference to the god Marduk. And then finally you have Azariah, Yahweh is my help. And it becomes Abednego, who meant a servant of Nabu, who was one of the Babylonian gods as well. So basically, if you see what's happening here, they took the names that were associated with God and with Yahweh and the worship and service of Him, and they transferred their names to Babylonian gods, completely designed to transform their identity and their allegiance. They would be trained. You may say brainwashed was the goal. For the next 3 years, that was what they faced. They faced basic brainwashing into the Babylonian ways of thinking. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So the reason why we believe that they were made into eunuchs was because that's who they're with. They're in that section. Generally, in that time frame, males would not be allowed into service of the king unless they were eunuchs. So. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs not to not defile himself, but God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned you your food and your drink. For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them for this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. It sounds like a terrible idea to me, but that's what they did. Staying faithful in Babylon. Up until this point, the four young men, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they provided seemingly no resistance to the assimilation that they're undergoing into Babylonian culture. They're kind of going along with it. As they kind of submitted themselves to the new situation, but there was a line there they could not cross. And this is where we start to kind of bring it into application for today. The young men refused to defile themselves with the Babylonian diet. Now, here's the question. What was the defilement? That's the question. Don't say anything out loud. I want you to think about it. What was the defilement? There probably could be multiple things that could fall into this. It could be that the Babylonian diet violated some sort of kosher laws, but we know that the Jewish diet had a lot of wine in it, so it probably wasn't kosher laws. It could be that the food and wine was off before it was given to them, was offered to the Babylonian gods and worship. But they didn't avoid all the food. The vegetables they would still eat. It could be that they viewed the king's provisions as an acceptance of his sovereignty and control over them. But again, they ate the vegetables. So I don't think it's really any of those things. What do you think it is? Okay, some sort of cultural relevance, okay? Okay, maybe.
I think it's because the Jews are picky about their preparation.
Okay, not being prepared, food not being prepared properly, okay?
Yes, it would be contaminated. If it wasn't contaminated with what contaminates their food, then it would be that the king would eat what was offered to the gods.
Okay, all right.
And vegetables was not high on the list of offerings.
No.
I was
Okay.
thinking it might be Mosaic law. I mean,
Mosaic law,
you
okay.
might have some animals that, using the ones with the hooves and all that, that things would have gone into.
Okay.
They ate it with the blood. Maybe it was not, drained like it's supposed to be, like in biblical times, and then maybe it was a pig in there. I don't know, but I know they're supposed to drain the meat and do it a certain way.
Okay. So kind of like same thing, type of preparation type of thing, okay? Anybody else have any thoughts? I'll tell you what I think. Take it if you want. You can take it or leave it. The Bible doesn't say, so we can definitely speculate about it. Um, okay. Kylie, you have an-
It's really dirty how it explains that it's the body is in
Okay, and go ahead. What does that mean?
Well, it's really hard to explain, but whenever you eat vegetables, it's kind of cool because when you restrict certain calories, your body, all the cells in your body actually kind of shed the outside and then they renew.
Okay. Okay. All right.
That's why they were really
I still hate
get
vegetables,
rid
but
of all the
yeah, I still hate them. You're never gonna get me to like them, but um, yeah. Okay.
What if they just got what the king didn't want? Just got seconds.
Okay. So it wasn't the best. It was just scraps.
Yeah.
Okay. Possibly. Yeah. This is my opinion. Again, take it with what you want, leave it, think what you want. I think this is about who gets success for who they are. I think this is a power play. This is my think. I think their minds are being fed by the Babylonians already. They have no chance to worship God in the ways that they would normally worship, right? They can't go to the temple. They can pray. Daniel does that. We know that because of later in the story. But their minds are being fed totally by the Babylonians. So this is more of a self-denial so that the Babylonians can't take credit for their success. That the success that they will have in their appearance and in the way they present is from God. That only God could give them that. And the reason why is because I would have to think that the meats and the thing and the wine and everything they were getting, if it was the king's diet, that's gonna be good stuff. I mean, in the sense of, this is the stuff that would have been consumed. It should have been superior, but it wasn't. And so we'll look at. But that's my thing is I think it's about attributing success. So, and I think that's here in what Daniel proposes a test. What's interesting is that the chief of the eunuchs did not agree to this. He said, no, I'm not doing it. You're not going to talk me into this. This is a bad idea. You're going to get me killed. You're going to get you killed. And everybody's going to get killed. And this is a bad idea. But Daniel proposed a test. And I do want to make a note here because of the recent fad, the Daniel diet. I don't think this is a pattern for our diets. I really don't. Because I really don't think that was the purpose. The purpose was to show who is in control and who brings, because remember the theme of Daniel. God is in control. It is God who brings success. By giving their diet and saying, God, you're the only one who's going to sustain us. You're the only nutrition that's going to be enough. They're giving credit to God for their sustenance. Basically saying, God, you're still in control here. And if you remember, this is only a temporary thing. It was 10 days. So it wasn't going to be a permanent thing. We know that later in life, matter of fact, Daniel did enjoy the Babylonian foods, and Daniel 10:3 talks about that. And here's another part of it. This diet was private. It wasn't public. The chief didn't know. Nobody knew what was going on. There was one guy that knew and one guy that accepted it, but that was it. Only the guard that would actually bring them the food, kind of like the guy that would keep them under house arrest. He was the only one that knew what they were doing. Not even the chief eunuch knew. And so I do think there's a miracle here, that God miraculously gave Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah success. They didn't have any food strikes, right? It wasn't like we're not going to eat, food strike, didn't do that. They asked for permission to engage in the activity, so they were even respectful in doing this. The chief official, he declined their ability to do what they requested, so Daniel chose another strategy to accomplish the goal. They would appeal to God for success. So this is why I think they were literally eating to the glory of God, right? Because whether we eat, drink, or whatsoever we do to the glory of God. And so they were literally eating to the glory of God and saying, God, we realize the only way we're going to have success is if you bring it and if you allow it. So, as for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. This is kind of a summary here that's going to cover the rest of the book. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. And among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So again, there's that success. Where did it come from? It came from God, yes. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all of his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. So their faithfulness to God is rewarded. It's rewarded. God gave the 4 men prosperity and success in lots of different areas. They looked better. They were smarter. They had better understanding, better knowledge, dreams and visions. We're going to see the importance of that here in the future. And gave them a very influential standing. So God gave these 4 young men prosperity and success. And why did he give them prosperity and success? It's because their faith was in him. Their faith was not in themselves. It wasn't in the resistance movement. It wasn't anything like that. Their faith was in God. And so they're presented to Nebuchadnezzar, and they had gained wisdom, not because of their education, but because God had given it to them. They had grown physically, not because of their diet, but because God had caused it. And so everything about their life is going to be about what God has done for them. And then it talks about Daniel's length of service. Daniel would span the entire Babylonian captivity. The Babylonian captivity goes, anybody know how long it would go for? Yeah, it goes 70 years. They would be in there, and he would be. So most likely, if we're figuring this, and there's some questions, most likely Daniel and his 3 friends are somewhere between 15 and 18 years old when they're taken into exile. So these are young men. These are not, sometimes they're pictured as older guys, but these are most likely younger men, maybe even as young as 13, some because of the way Jewish law and things work. They could have even been young as 13 years of age going into the service. And part of the reason why we think that is because of the length of Daniel's service, that he served the entire span of the Babylonian captivity. It would actually outlast those who brought him into the exile. And so in all these stories, one of the things that we're going to struggle with is what to do and what not to do. What is the example for us to follow, and what is the things that we should take, the takeaways? They were standing against their culture, right? They were brought into a foreign culture, and they took a stand against their culture. The question is, how do you do that? That's our question, because even today, that's the call for us today, right? We are in a culture, and we cannot always do what our culture is doing. Some of the things that our culture is doing are very bad. Where do we draw these lines? And how do we take our stand, and how do we trust in God? And so Jesus said this, and I think this is a verse that really applies to the book of Daniel and really applies to us today. Matthew 10:16, "Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as dove." We have to recognize this. Many of the situations that we're going to be faced with in life, and most likely you've already had them happen to you, they're not clear cut. Sometimes it's hard to know what is the right way to walk. Questions of education. Should I do public education, private education, homeschool? What is the right thing for my children? Well, that's not clear cut. There's a lot of different answers to that. What movies and shows are appropriate? How about our interaction on social media? Where do we draw the lines there? What our culture permits doesn't mean we should engage in it. And we have to recognize that. So we have to recognize that we really are in the same situation as these four young men. There are things that we have to have conviction about and have to pray about and have to learn about and have to trust God about when it comes to these things. So we are philosophically connected to Daniel and navigating a culture that is to be foreign to us, right? Isn't that true? That the culture should be foreign to us. We are supposed to be strangers and foreigners. This isn't supposed to feel right all the time. And we kind of look at that and go, why are they doing that? That makes no sense. And we should have that feeling and those thinkings. And so it really does cause us to take stock and say, what is the right thing in this situation? What has God revealed to us? Where are the lines that we're going to draw? I'm not talking about theological doctrine here. That's not what we're talking about. Because this isn't refusing to eat food. That's not a theological doctrine. But there's something else bigger in play. And so we have to recognize that when we come into those sort of situations. How are we going to draw those lines and where are they going to be? So, thoughts or questions you may have. That's Daniel chapter 1. Yeah, I tend to, being from nobility, they would have been students of the scriptures. They would have known. Their contemporaries of even people like, the people that would have been around them at the time. They would have been around very influential people, very in tuned, and it would have been part of their very life. Would have been wrapped around into, and so they were well trained and. Yeah, definitely well trained. It's the only way, and I think that's for parents too. We send our children out into the world, and we do have a job to train. Training starts at home. There's some lessons to be learned there, and we have to do our very best to know that they're going into a hostile culture at some point, and do our very best to teach them the ways of the Lord, and pray for them that they stand strong when they're in those things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you stand up and say, I'm a Christian, you might just die. They're all like that.
Yeah.
And that could very well come here one day. We'll be tested to see how we respond.
Quite possibly. I pray not, but quite possibly. Yeah, and that's one of those things, again, I know the line was there for them. Does that mean the line was there for everybody? No, because we know some of the other ones that were there during the exile too. We know about Esther. We know about Mordecai. There's a lot of, and some of them lost their Jewish identity, a lot of it, and they didn't know, so. Yeah. So we have a lot of records from this time of what was going on. So yeah. So let's talk about some things that are a little bit more practical for us today. In what ways does our culture try to redefine identity and shift our allegiance away from God? Basic family, sure. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to be radicalized, like if you want your mind to like hurt tonight or make you angry, or if you're into rage bait or something like that, go online and Google these. There are two gay guys that had a surrogacy for a baby, and how they're treating that baby, and how the baby is saying "mama," and they're making fun of the baby because there's no mama. And you want to see what's going on in our culture and how evil it's become. It's there. I know, and I'm on Facebook. They're probably going to take down the video, but but it's wrong. It's evil, and it's got to be.
Daycare, and I have two ladies. I have a little girl, and what is her first word? Dad.
Mm.
She does.
Yeah,
It's very easy.
but
What's
all
going to happen is
exactly. It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
what's going to happen in school. They say, hey, can you write a paper about your dad?
And all of these things, they're and we don't we they reshape us because they caught years ago. This would never have been heard of, but now it's almost being mainstream normalized. And like you said, now you're hateful if you say, "Hey, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that."
They're
Um,
changing our nursery rhymes to be
yeah,
non-sexual,
yeah.
like Snow White.
Yeah, yeah, they're doing a lot of that. Yeah. So in what ways is this happening? What ways are we are we seeing the shifts? I mean, obviously in sexuality, we're seeing the shifts. We're seeing the shifts in family biological realities.
Also, marriage is going out the
Marriage would be another one that's being we redefined and changed that. Sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I mean that's another thing is that it's coming into the church. It's coming into the church.
not specifically Christian related, but the attitude of work ethic.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, you're hearing more talk of things like UBI. You know what UBI is? Universal Basic Income, where they're just going to give everybody money because the robots have taken over jobs, and you can just sit at home with that $1,000 a month and buy things from the government. This is reality. They're literally talking about this. Um,
That is scary
mhm.
because when you become dependent
Yeah.
on the government basically treats you like a slave.
Yeah. There's also more thinking about the AI that we're really actually making a god, an all-seeing, all-knowing entity. Um, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Cannot get the general facts of a easy news story. I mean, hackers
Yeah.
rescued 24 hours after they became lost. But in the story, they were gone 2 weeks.
But think about this. The facts won't matter if you have no access to them.
If AI cannot get that kind of stuff,
It doesn't have to.
you want that AI.
No. But no. You're right. But what I'm saying is, here's the bad thing about it is, it won't matter because you won't know any different, because that's the only information that will be available, and that's where things are going. It's kind of, and all these things are shifting us, whether we realize it or not. They're all cultural shifts, and we have to realize some of them can be helpful. AI does have I think it does have a purpose. It's a search engine, stuff like that. Yeah, it does have a, but where are the lines? That's the question that we have to ask. Where are the lines? Where do we take our stand and say, hey, this is a line? For Daniel, he found that line. That's something that we're going to have to work to find. In other words, we can't shift just because our culture is shifting. Yeah, we're going to have to do that.
Trump's done a good job at defining the man and woman.
Yes, for now. For now, yeah.
I think the biggest thing we need to give up is, and I'm not going to do it, is TV.
Is what?
TV.
TV?
They've been brainwashing us. They've been doing
Yeah.
diagnosis.
But here's the part that'll may even be worse than that. The TV doesn't even matter anymore because everybody's got one of these in their pockets. And here's the crazy thing about it. This is mine, and mine's not like yours. And I'm seeing things you will never see, and you're seeing things I will never see, because it's completely individualized, tailored to the person. So we even TV. Think about years ago, everybody turned on the TV and they watched the same game, right? They watched the same news. They had the same access to the same information. Now we don't. We have no common community or thread. My son came home the other night and said, Dad, have you heard of this artist? And he named some person. I was like, I've never heard that name before in my life. Had no idea what he was talking about. It was like we were living in two different worlds. And he was like telling me about this person. I was like, and I mean, I felt old until I realized that probably nobody knows this guy. That it's only going to be a certain subset of people who listen to a certain genre of music on Spotify that are ever going to hear it because it's not on the radio, because we don't even listen to radios anymore. So it's shifting faster than we know. The reason why I was talking about the facts, Luis, is because my son's generation, Cohen, is going to be the last generation that will remember life without the AI. All the children beneath that, that's all they're going to know. And they're not even going to have access to Wikipedia, which is terrible, or any of the encyclopedias will be gone. Libraries will be a thing of the past. All of that will be completely gone. Matter of fact, one of the things that they're saying right now is if you're really into this sort of cultural shifting and seeing, get your hand on physical books. Physical books are really going to matter in the future because that's going to be concrete. That's what they're saying. Yeah, yeah,
What about the lack of disrespect for
yeah,
teachers, police,
yeah,
anybody in command? There's just like totally no respect.
yeah. Remind,
For themselves.
not even for themselves, correct? Yeah,
Every day, and we're starting with young ones, you know. That's
yeah.
got to be taught at the house.
So, yeah. It's reminding me of there was no king in Israel and everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. And the reason why that verse is, and I thought maybe next year we might do the book of Judges together because of that theme. And the reason why that theme stands out to me right now, especially, is because of the individualized nature of that, and the compartmentalization of our culture and the individualization of our culture, so that what my eyes see to what your eyes see are different things. And so I'll react to the things that I'm seeing in my eyes, and you'll react to the things seeing in your eyes. So we're all doing what is right to our own eyes, and we're literally seeing that played out in our own world. There's something really crazy about that we are going back to that point. Also really crazy to think that they're holding a gay pride festival at the Dead Sea coming up. History repeats. They say history doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes. So yeah, it's kind of rhyming.
Understand why they care about 1% of the population.
I don't know.
Why they give that so much attention.
I think it's money. That I think is money. There's a lot of money.
1% of the population, they ain't got that.
They got a lot of money, and they got a lot of support, a lot of it. So, yeah, going back to the story, Daniel chose to draw the line there and at the food. What principles can we learn from where they chose to draw the line?
Well, we know where to draw the line from God's word.
Okay, yeah, we have access to the Word of God, lays out the lines.
Well, they can,
But they did too. Yeah, they did too.
so that's how they live their life. That's why
Mm-hmm.
they're like they were.
Yeah.
They're
So what? So give me a principle from that. Live your life according to the Word of God. That's a principle.
There's two things we've got to learn is coming into our homes and taking our Bibles.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Throwing them on the burn pile,
Yeah.
coming in and taking our weapons.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So by saying, and I think it's also interesting. This was a private matter, so there was a strength of character. There was a personal action. Okay. Okay. Mm,
He was supporting their different characters, but it wasn't beginning to see at that time.
yeah.
Steve, you know all about it.
The four of them stood up together because they were in it together.
Okay. So there's an importance from having a fellowship.
Too much of the time, I think Christians, whether it's workforce, school, whatever, they feel alone.
Mm, yeah. I think that's a very important point because we learn the power of camaraderie and fellowship. That we need to build the bonds. We stand together. And standing together and accountability. Hey, don't eat that. I mean, you can imagine, Dan. I mean, you think practically, these guys are, maybe they were hungry and they bring in the food, and those guys over there eating the T-bone steaks, and you're giving me lettuce. Man, that's tough. I mean, for me, it's not all that tough. I'm eating the T-bones. But my point being that, for them, it was really, really tough. They had made this commitment to say, we're only going to do this. And I think one of the things that made that possible was standing together. Saying, we're going to stand together, and we're going to rely on God together, and we're in this together. That's important.
Your sermon last Sunday.
And it'll be a little bit of this coming Sundays as well. We got to stand together.
When I was younger, it was almost assumed that your coworkers, that your fellow students were not necessarily Christian, but God-fearing. They, they were raised with the attitude that there were things that you just didn't do because it wasn't right.
A general sense of morality.
Uh,
Yeah. No.
it, it's eroded
Yeah.
to where it's the do your own thing.
Well, and I think what we were talking about earlier kind of plays into this. If the evil one is trying to individualize us and compartmentalize us and isolate us, the opposite of that is unity and fellowship and togetherness. So then that's what we have to fight to maintain, which is what Ephesians said, maintain unity. You can't do that in isolation. There's no lone wolf Christianity. That's not a thing. And so we have to be together. And we have to emphasize the importance of that because it is going to be so much easier for us to fall. And here's the thing. The battles that you fought in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they're not the battles anymore. And they're not even on our radar screen. I got to be honest with you, not even on my radar screen. There are some other things that are coming up that are on the radar screen now. And if we don't stand together, it's going to be really hard for any church to survive, for any assembly to survive, because it's going to be easier to be picked off. That's why when COVID happened, I knew it was evil. I knew right off the bat there was a lot of evil that was going to come from this. Because the first thing they did was isolate. Stay away from each other. Don't talk to each other. And be afraid of each other. And yet you saw how easy it was. And so it is going to be very important in the future that we take our stands in unity and in togetherness so that we don't have that isolation. Isolation will destroy us. There's no doubt about that. And I see that with Daniel. I think if Daniel is by himself, or if Meshach, Shadrach, if they're all compartmentalized and isolated, we may not have the stories we have, but they stood together. And that there's a power in that, and that's important. We stand together. So. No, yes, you're right.
And that's the deal. Where do we draw the line? We should have drawn it years ago, but we were the silent majority.
That's it right there. The silent majority. And they said, well, the silent majority is not silent anymore, but is it too late? Did we stay silent for too long? And that's a concern. I mean, it is a concern going forward. So. But I do believe that, as in the days of the prophets, that there are many people who have not bowed the knee, that are still standing strong in the Word of God. I still believe the same way we do and still are standing. and we just need to stand together. We need to fight. And this is why I said the battles that and it's not to insult the people that came before. They had different battles to fight. I mean, we have to recognize that. That's not anything against them. They had battles they had to fight. But their battles are different than our battles, and I can't be so worried about the small points of disagreement. If we can agree with people doctrinally, we need to stand with them together. And we can't be running to the little points of disagreement that will divide us apart. It will not work. It just will not work. We have to say these are the things we stand upon. We stand together on these things. If it doesn't fall within these things, we don't even need to be arguing about it. It's not even something that we're talking about. We've got much bigger things to focus on. So, yeah, we don't want communism. Yes, I will stand on that. We don't want communism. So, all right. Well, just giving you a little preview. This is what the book of Daniel is. Even though we know the story, there's a lot more there for us. And you might have only gone over these stories when you were in Sunday school or something like that. But there's a lot more to these stories, and the reasons why they're there. Very applicable to us today and very practical for us today. So even though you may know the story and you read Daniel chapter 2 and you know, oh, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, I know about that. Stop to think, why is it there, and what does it mean for us today? Because these are very practical stories for us today. So, all right, let's go ahead and close in prayer, and then we'll have our prayer time together. God our Father, I pray first of all that you would grant us wisdom and guidance and understanding. Father, we do recognize each one of us here tonight. I know that we all realize that we are living in a culture that we cannot agree with in many ways. And we need wisdom on where to draw these lines and how to draw them, and what we can do and what we can't do. And Father, you've given us your word that's outlined so many of those things. And I pray, Father, that we would be strong to stand on your word. And Father, where we can find